Hello and welcome to another classic scientific paper review. I'm Dr. Mark Williamson, and today I will be covering experimental zoogeography of islands, the colonization of empty islands. So the paper is by Simberloff and E.O. Wilson in 1969, found in Ecology. So what this paper did is really pretty remarkable. So the authors fumigated six small mangrove islands in the Florida Keys. And from there, they were able to measure colonization of insects and other arthropods as time went on. They actually measured this throughout an entire year. So a colonization of essentially these barren mangrove islands. Those are very small islands, very small pieces. So they would have to go out there and actually try to count the different species individuals. So there's a lot of complications to this. So they try to carefully consider everything, like dealing with foraging, like are species really colonizing, or are they just foraging and going back to where they're actually um, located? Did seasonality matter? Turns out it really didn't. How to classify um, whether it's colonization or not, classify different organisms, and then what organisms to include. They ended up not really including things like birds, really just arthropods of various sorts. They also didn't include things that were essentially not colonizing the actual island, if they were kind of below the mud line, if they were more aquatic. So a lot that went into this than simply counting, but count they did. And some things they found, certainly transport by air to these islands was dominant. So whether they're strong flying insects or weak flying insects, or even just passively floating on the air like spiderlings, that was the dominant, though they did find other colonization. Like, for example, I think there's one notable observation of like an earwig swimming and crawling up. So that wasn't the only way to get by air. It could be others, but that was by far the dominant. And so they measured the number of species, sort of before they fumigated, and then measure across a year, and then especially time point at the end. And they found that at the end, the number of species didn't really change significantly from before and after. However, the species composition could vary really considerably. And that immigration and extinction curves were highly variable across different sort of clades. And so these are some sort of pretty fascinating graphs that they did. The top one up here is, four of those islands, E2, E3, ST2, and E1. And so the y-axis is the number of species present. So they had the pre-defaunation survey, that was before the fumigation, measured across distinct time points up to about 365 days, some not quite a year. And then the final monitoring, and you can see the curves are different, but then they kind of end up, some are more than are different than the beginning, but by and large, number of species didn't change significantly. This is seen more clearly in uh, island E7 and E9. See here the start and pretty close, start and pretty close. You see the curves kind of gradually go up, and at some point, looks like they're plateauing. So what's also really fascinating about this, they have a long appendix where they actually show the colonists of each island, these tables. And so I'm just showing E1, but it's for everyone. And they show the different species, and the major clades, major groups across the time point. So the white means they're inferred to be absent. The black one is they were actually observed, so they are present. And then the shaded ones are they weren't directly seen, but other indirect evidence inferred that they were there. And so we can see, that there's, some that, like for example, this Ek dilota, it was there before, disappeared, but then it showed back up. Other ones, were there, like, in Thysanura, I believe those are the thripes. They were there, but they never showed back up. And there's even ones that weren't there, um, but then showed up. So like in like the Hymeniptera, they weren't there before, but then there's ones that ended up at the end. So a lot of really detailed information at the end. So, what's some of the importance of this? So, first we can look at citations. So this is digitally hosted now on JSTOR, and it gave it 201 citations. But I think that's just for the updated sort of digitized version. Google Scholar has it at close to 1,000, which again, I think sometimes citations is helpful, though I think it underscores some of the importance. Another really piece that helps tell us that this paper was important in ecology is it included in the book Foundations of Ecology. So these are classic papers. It was recognized as a classic ecological paper, and so it's in that collection. And I think, it's just a stunning work of experiment and observation. So I think a lot of ecological modeling or theories are very interesting, but sort of suffer from not really being tested. Maybe some observation, but not a lot of experiment. But these actually researchers went out, ran these natural experiments, and actually saw colonization and counted colonization in this study rather than just theorizing about it. So I think that's really important. And in fact, it won an award called the Mercer Award from the ESA, Ecological Society of America, in 1971. And I found this uh, thing called the Citation Classic. It's back in 1984. I think it's by one of the co-authors, Simberloff, talking about how this is some of the importance of this study was it really showed the strongest support for equilibrium theory by actually going out and testing it. So I think that's really important. So with that, thanks for joining for another classic paper review. Hopefully you found this interesting, and certainly go and read the paper if you haven't. Thanks.